look, I grew up with British literature because I am of the belief that good or bad, things happen throughout history for all countries. British Empire came, British Empire changed the language, British Empire gave us Western literature. Austen is as much an Indian author, a Pakistani author, a Bangladeshi author, a colonial author, whatever the case, she's someone we grew up reading. And she's very much Pakistani author also. She didn't know it. I call her Jane Khala, Jane Auntie, but Austen didn't know she was Pakistani, but she was. But going back to reading, I read, because I was sent to English medium schools, I read British literature, even though I considered it my own. And at that young age, I didn't realize I was reading British or American, Judy Blume or whatnot. I would read whatever was on the shelf. But because the only language I could read was English, I read, S.E. Hinton, Outsiders, Judy Blume, Austen, etc. What happens when you read literature which is set in another culture and not your own, is that you very quickly develop, I think, what Du Bois might have meant by a double consciousness in a way, which is, if I'm using his ideas correctly, is that I had to learn to see myself in a culture that I wasn't really part of. And the good thing I think about that is that you very quickly realize how similar we all are, right? When I read Austen, even at a young age, I remember she would say bonnet and I would think dupatta. She would say, for instance, sandwich and I would think samosa. So in my mind, I very quickly, and nothing was alien to me because I was like, oh, this is because I grew up abroad also a little bit and I just learned to translate, transpose a lot of what I was reading into my own culture. So it was never a question of being other for me. And I was never confused about my identity or whom I was or what I was reading wasn't part of me because I just quickly did that, samosa and this and that and whatever from an early age. I happened to come across Macaulay in my own independent reading. In Pakistan or even otherwise, I don't ever remember his name coming up, even though I was a British literature student. We read Shakespeare and John Donne and Andrew Marvell, but none of the colonial stuff really came up, or at least when I was an A-level student, came up for me. So I happened to find his Minute on Education in some independent reading, and I remember being shocked, and I remember just crying, because this was the first time I realized that the language I was speaking had a very unsavory origin story. And so what do you do with that, right? And I think for me, I decided, okay, the origin story may not be very palatable, but it is mine now, and I have to do something more sweet with it when I speak it. And so for me, what I wanted to do though was Macaulay wanted to create confused characters who were neither brown or white, and I wanted to, for a very long time, for years on end, and it took a lot of courage for me to be able to do that, was to take a British classic and transpose it into my own culture. I remember the first time I read Pride and Prejudice, I remember saying, this is a Pakistani book, this is a Pakistani author, this is Pakistan. Because this was a mother with 5 daughters. She's not listening to her daughters. She needs them to get married off, and she needs them to get married off well, because in that cultural milieu, once again, the ring that you wear is going to determine not just your life, your vacations, the money you can spend on your Chanel bags and your diamonds, but also the future of your children, right? And you can also help you. The more money you marry, the better you marry, the better you can help the rest of your family. And that's the milieu that Austen lived in. But I chose Austen because for me, a mother wanting her 5 daughters to marry well, and the daughters not necessarily being able to do so for whatever quirks, was a quintessential Pakistani story when I read it at, I think, 15, 16.